In this country, we threw tea away for the purposes of freedom. And if there's one thing the British do better than us, it's the tea. So that must have been a pretty big sacrifice. Freedom is a goal in almost all political movements. Granted, they may play around with the definition of freedom to suit their goals, but you never really can escape the concept of freedom in the world of politics. But outside of politics, freedom can be suppressed or nourished in our interpersonal relationships as well. Like, let's say your friend is drunk and wants to text their ex a very long, compromising message. By taking away their phone, you take away their freedom, but it's for their best interest, right? I mean, maybe they should be allowed to drunk text their ex. Who are you to tell them how to live their love life? But okay, if your friend is addicted to hardcore drugs, then maybe it is moral to take away their freedom to use. On the other hand, if you and your friends are all out to dinner and one of them forcibly orders salads for everyone because it'll be healthier, then you should commit an assault. That wouldn't be very okay. So where do we draw the line between allowing people we care about to do their own thing and protecting them from harmful decisions? In this book, the Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi has a couple arguments that are in favor of freedom rather than this best interest approach. So a lot of Chinese philosophers convey their arguments and points through stories, and Zhuangzi is no exception. We're going to look at 3 stories from his book, The Zhuangzi, that touch on letting others be. Alright, so story number 1 comes from chapter 18 and is about a duke capturing this great seabird. And although the duke captured our feathered friend here, he treats him right. He plays music for him and sets up a full-on banquet, but the bird really isn't into it, and 3 days later, he dies. This is because the duke nourished the bird with what would be good for himself, and not what would be good for birds. Likewise, you may think you know what's best for your friend, but you may be letting your own interests get in the way. Like, let's say your friend comes up to you and is like, hey, I signed us up for a 5-mile run. You, assumably, aren't into this, but your friend, now he is a big runner. And you know, he makes arguments about how cardio is good for you and all that, but at the end of the day, it's really his own interests that are informing what he believes to be in your best interest. So ultimately, we should try to be more humble in what we think we believe is in the best interest of our friend. I mean, yeah, if they're addicted to drugs, then helping them off that addiction is still the moral thing to do. But when it comes to smaller scale stuff, don't assume you know what your friend really needs. When fish are underwater, they live. When people are underwater, they die. Being fundamentally different in nature, they also like and dislike different things. For this reason, the sages of old never expect uniformity in ability or sameness in activity among different beings. Now you might hear that quote and think, hey, they're talking about different species, not different people. I mean, obviously birds and humans need different things, you dumbass. Well, first of all, the word beings is a bit vague, but I'd argue 2 different humans are 2 different beings. And besides, that actually leads us into our next story. So one day, Confucius, yes that Confucius, comes up to this guy, Yan Hui, and says, dude, you're poor and your house is falling apart. Why don't you get a job? Just full on roasting this guy. But Yan Hui in response says, I have 8 acres of fields across the city wall, enough for vegetables and grain. I also have 1.5 acres of farmland nearby, which gives me enough silk and hemp. Strumming my zithers is enough to give me pleasure. Studying Tao with you is enough to make me happy. I don't want a job. So again, we get a bit of distinguishing between what's in your interest versus what's in your friend's best interest. Here, it looks like Confucius values wealth and a stable house. I don't know if that's really accurate, but Yan Hui doesn't. However, this story is also more about basic needs. Yan Hui justifies himself by explaining how he takes care of food and clothing. And I mean, even if his place is falling apart, it's still a place. Probably better than what you could get in New York City for $5,000. So maybe the takeaway here is that we shouldn't be concerned if our friend's basic needs are not being threatened. Going back to our drug addiction example, almost all basic needs are being threatened depending on the severity of it all. But if your friend wants to send a dumb text to their ex, then that doesn't really threaten any bare necessities, unless their ex is their sugar mama. The last story involves the man himself, Zhuangzi. So he's chilling on a bridge fishing, then these 2 messengers come up to him and say, hey, we represent the king of Chu, and he'd like to invite you to help him with the affairs of the state. This position would require a lot of work, but it would mean a lot of money and a snazzy place to live. Now Zhuangzi hears this and replies, I have heard that the state of Chu has a sacred turtle, which has been dead for 3,000 years. The king has wrapped it in cloth, placed it in an ornate box, and keeps it in his ancestral temple. Now let me ask you about this turtle. Would it rather be dead and have its remaining bones be venerated, or would it rather be alive and drag its tail in the mud? Obviously the turtle would rather be alive and dirty than dead and kept sacred, so Zhuangzi rejects their offer. Wait, what? How does that turtle story relate to the invitation by the king at all? Well, taking this position in government would mean riches and fame. But Zhuangzi wouldn't be free in the sense that he'd be forced to do something that he doesn't want to do. He wouldn't be free to do what he wants in life. And yeah, that means less money, but like the turtle, he'd rather be free in life than be well off. Think of it like this. Imagine a wealthy person comes up to you and is like, hey, how would you like to live rent-free in a room at my beautiful mansion? You can ask for anything you want and I'll get it for you. A PS5, sushi, a rare comic book, literally any material thing you want, it's yours. The only catch is that you must stay in that room for the rest of your life with no internet and no one can visit you. Now, would you take that offer? I mean, I might see some of you materialists out there taking it, but for the rest of us, we value our freedom too much to give it all up for these things. So when you want to act in someone's best interest, it might be important to remember that there may be an inherent value in personal freedom. Alright, so those are 3 points from Zhuangzi that seems to point towards respecting people's personal freedom, even if it's contrary to your view of their best interest. We can't be sure what their best interest is, we shouldn't be concerned if their basic needs aren't being jeopardized, and maybe there's an inherent value in personal freedom. Or maybe we can be concerned but just not force any decisions on them. I don't know, that sounds like a good compromise. You could always counsel them and give them advice, but don't order anyone a f***ing salad at dinner for them. Anyway, that's all I got for you. If you enjoyed the video, then like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.